There is a whole and very successful genre in fantasy gaming which depicts a concentrated adventure, concentrated in time and space. And this is the dungeon crawler genre. From the classic dungeon that came out more or less at the same time as the original Dungeons and Dragons, to Hero Quest, Descent, many games of this kind. But there's also another genre of fantasy board games that have a broader span and they cover a larger period in time, vaster areas. If the dungeon crawl is a short story, this other genre is the novel, and this is the fantasy campaign game. From the classic Talisman to the recent Mage Knight, the board game, games that depict larger, more complex adventures with more character progression. One such game is Runebound, published by Fantasy Flight Games. This is a game that already went through several editions, and this is the third edition, but it is also the only one that I played. So I won't be able in my video to comment about the other editions and make a comparison because I simply do not know those editions. But I think that if you know them and you watch my video, you'll still be able to glean some information about the differences between this edition and the previous ones. My video, however, is mainly geared towards players that do not know Runebound by a player that only knows of this edition. So, fantasy campaign game, fantasy setting, players represent heroes that start as pretty powerless, pretty weak, and they go through various adventures, seeking upgrades, magic items, various stages of character advancement, trying to become more and more powerful in a string of adventures leading up to a final confrontation that will decide the outcome of the game. Runebound 3rd edition. Let me show how the game works. This is the board for the game. It is a mounted board, of course. It looks really neat. I mean, if you look at it from here, from this distance, it looks like a painting, just as a nice fantasy map from a book. But when you move close, you will realize that actually there is an hexagonal grid on it, which is also perfectly visible when you're sitting at the table, close enough to play the game. So it is both incredibly good looking, in my opinion, and also very functional. Each player in the game controls a character. The location of the character on the board is represented by a miniature, such as this one, and then the basic stats of the character are represented by a card, such as this one. There is a side that you use with some flavor text to introduce you to the character and some initial information about setup. But then this is the side of the card that you will use, and you will keep face up during the game. Each character has a number of movement points represented actually by movement dice. Lisa, for example, starts with 3 movement dice. These are the dice, we'll talk about them in a sec. Health points. Classic, when you take damage, you lose health points from that pool. When you regenerate or heal, you regain points, and if you go down to 0, you are, well, not entirely dead here, you're knocked out, and then that simply means that you will need to spend your next actions to heal, to regenerate, to get better, because you need to have at least a single point to be able to go around the board and perform actions. So death is not the end, but it does consume actions, and therefore it still gives you a penalty. Here we have the maximum hand of skill cards a character can have. These skill cards are used for various things. At the most basic level, well, they represent skills that the character may learn. When you get a new card, it doesn't mean that you know the skill yet. It means that you figured out potentially how to learn the skill. And Lisa has an initial hand of 3 cards, so the characters will have different cards. During the game, you may be able to develop these skills, so actually to transform the card from your hand into an actual skill. To do so, you need to spend trophies, we'll explain later what those are, equal to the number of orbs indicated here. So to develop this card, put it face up by my card and gain the corresponding benefit, I simply need to spend a single trophy, which can be of any kind. Other cards require specific types of orbs. For example, here I need an orb that comes from a trophy that usually is acquired through combat, and then other 3 trophies that can be of any kind. So large number of effects and ways of customizing your character by developing different skills. Another thing is that you may notice that some of these cards have a symbol here and some other ones don't. This is because the skill deck is also used to take tests in several attributes. You have 3 attributes on your card, which are body, mind, and spirit, mana, magic, call it whatever you want. Sometimes you need to test these attributes, then you draw a number of cards from the skill deck equal to the amount of points that you have in that attribute. For example, if I had 2, I take 2 cards. I look at this area here, and if at least one of the cards has one such symbol, then my test was successful. If I only drew cards without that symbol, then I failed the test. One further way in which skill cards are used is to exert. Exert is a game effect that you can use by simply discarding cards. When you exert, you will be able to reroll a movement die when you're moving, but also when you're using the movement die for other game effects, and also you can exert to trigger certain game effects. There's simply game effects that says you need to exert to do this, then you discard a card and you do that. So the skill cards are used for a variety of things, and it's really cool that they are so flexible. Now, what happens during your turn? During your turn, you do 3 things or better. You can take 3 actions, and these actions can be any combination of actions from a variety of lists. You can perform the same action several times. You can perform actions in different orders. There's a lot of flexibility there. Basic action is to move. Then when you move, you can either choose to simply move a single hex to move to a space adjacent to you, or you may choose to move by using dice. Then you roll dice equal to your movement value, and you will spend the terrain icons to move. You need to move, of course, in an uninterrupted line of hexes. This is a wild symbol, this is a plain symbol, and here we have a double symbol that represents plains and hills. There are other ones like plains, like hills and forests, mountains and water. Certain types of terrain are more common, which represents the fact that certain types of terrain are easier to travel through. So if I have this, for example, I can easily travel through 2 plains and whatever I want. This is a wild symbol, a plain, a hill, and whatever I want. For example, I would be able to do 1, 2, 3. This is what I'm trying to do. Maybe 1, 2, 3. I want to go there. That would be a legal movement. Another action that you can take is to train. Then you simply draw cards from the skill deck equal to your hand value. That will probably put you over your maximum hand value unless your hand was empty. And then you look at the new cards that you have, and then you discard down up to your maximum hand value. Suppose I had 2, I decide to train, so I get 3 more. My maximum hand is 3. I look at them, I select them, and then I discard down to 3. So I have a little more choice in case my hand is already full or almost full, and it's a good way also replenishing my hand in case I spent a lot of skill cards doing something else. Another action I can take is to heal. To heal, I roll 5 terrain dice, and I heal an health point. I recover a health point that I lost for each terrain die that I roll, which matches the terrain in which I am at the present time. So this is also a very smart economic way of handling the fact that different types of terrain will offer different possibilities. In the plains, it's more likely that you will be able to rest, find a medic, find somebody that helps you, and that is simulated by the fact that we're in the plains and you are resting. Then there are a lot of symbols that will allow you to recover. It's very likely to recover a lot of symbols. If you're in the mountains, then the dice have fewer mountain symbols, so on average you'll be able to recover fewer health points. Also, if you are in some element that has some civilization in it, villages, strongholds such as that one, shrines, cities, then if you spend a heal action there, you recover all of your lost health points automatically. You may shop, very important. There are 4 cities on the board, such as this one. Each city is associated with a market where you will find cards from this deck here. Each market has 3 cards that are associated with it. They're placed by the boards in an area associated with the names. For example, here we have Donsmore. There's an area on the edge that says Donsmore. Then you place 3 of these cards face up in that area. These represents items that you have heard are there. It's likely you will find there. When you get there and you perform the shop action, then actually you draw another card, you add it here so they become temporarily 4, and then either you buy a single card, so that 3 cards will be left, or if you decide not to buying anything, then a card is discarded, so at the end you still will have 3. That is, there are always 3 cards in a market when no one is around, 4 when somebody's interacting with the market, and 3 at the end of the interaction, at the end of the action. In many cases, you will be buying items. You simply need to spend a number of gold coins equal to the cost of the item, and you will gain the associated benefit. Sometimes it's a benefit that is specific, one simply indicated by the card. Other times, you will gain a weapon, and weapons, the effectiveness of the weapon is represented by tokens that you will add to your pool. Each character has a starting pool of combat tokens. We'll talk about those in a minute. And then there are many more combat tokens representing weapons. So you have to kind of keep them well organized. These tokens represent weapons, but they also represent other types of items. As you can see, they have a small code here. For example, this one is CO4, and this one is CO5, so on and so forth. Very small. So when you buy a weapon or another piece of equipment that has a token associated with it, the card also has a code here. So you simply need to find the matching code and to add the weapon or item to your pool of combat tokens. So we talked about moving, shopping, training, and resting or healing, but we still haven't talked about the coolest part, which is exploring, adventuring. Adventuring is the only action that does cost 2 actions. And you adventure when you are in an area with one of these tokens here. When you are in there, you flip it face up to represent the fact that that adventure has been exhausted, and you draw a card from the corresponding deck. There are 3 types of decks represent different types of adventures. The purple one, which is social, you will find mainly social-oriented quests. And when you resolve these, you simply read the text. You're presented with an option. You decide what you want to do, the challenges you want to take, the benefits that you are going for, and you resolve that. Green challenges here represent mainly quests. When you draw quest cards, because you're adventuring on a green area, you will get a quest card and you place it face up in front of you. Then you need to be in the corresponding area indicated on the card to resolve the quest. You go to that area, you explore, which simply means to roll movement dice and to try to match the results with the indications, here. So if I, for example, I get to the corresponding area, I spend an action, that arrow indicates an action. I spend an action to explore the Greenwood, and I get these 2 terrains, then I can get this benefit here. If I get these 2 icons, then I get this effect here. So you can have as many quests as you want, and they stay with you until you have resolved them, or simply until the end of the game if you don't resolve them. It's pretty neat. They represent the fact that you went to a location and you heard that there was a treasure or something cool in another area, and then you're going there to complete the quest. Finally, super importantly, there is the combat-oriented adventure, which is usually hosted in this deck here. Now, that being said, all 3 decks have cards of various types. There are combat cards here, combat cards there. It's just a matter of quantity, of ratio. Most combat cards are here, most social cards are here, most quests are here. But there's a little bit of unpredictability because you may still get a quest or a combat or a social mission where you do not expect it. Back to us to combat. When you do flip a card that represents a combat with an enemy, usually from this deck, but who knows, and you have to fight against that enemy, you give the card to the previous player in player's order, so that while the player will control the monster and you will fight against that monster, the next player in turn order can start taking their turn. That saves times. And if you have, for example, 3 players, then pretty much everybody's engaged. I'm taking my turn in which I'm fighting against the monster. The player that just went is controlling the monster, so he's fighting against me and having fun doing that. And the next player is simply taking their turn already. So pretty neat. Enemies will come with a number of health points that I'm trying to reduce to 0, and a pool of combat tokens too. And now it is time to talk about these combat tokens. How do they work? Well, simple. When it is time to resolve a fight, you, the player, pick up all of your combat tokens. So the starting ones, for example, these are the ones for Lisa, and any other ones that may be generated by objects and benefits. Suppose that I had these 2 items, then I add these to my pool of combat tokens. Then I simply toss them. I can toss them in the air, flip them like coins. You can use a dice tower. They work fairly well if you drop them in there. So in any ways, I try to randomize the way in which they'll fall. And after I drop my tokens, I'll have my pool of combat tokens for this combat round, and my opponent will pick up a pool of combat tokens for the enemy, and will also drop those. Then we simply look at the player that has the majority of yellow tokens, of yellow symbols up. That is the player that wins initiative. This side is 3, this side is 2, so they go first. And then we alternate taking actions one at a time. Usually to take an action, you spend a token or multiple tokens with the same symbol. For example, this symbol here, if I have it, allows me to inflict 2 points of damage against the opponent. This is like melee combat. This symbol has the same effect, so simply magic combat. So 2 points of damage are coming from magic. In case there are combat effects that affect magic or melee attacks. This is called agility. The agility symbol allows me to flip one of the tokens. You may have noticed that each token has 2 symbols, a big one and a small one. The big one is the one that actually matters. The small one is simply there as a reminder of what's on the other side, but cannot be activated. So I can spend an agility token to flip one of my unused tokens so I can use the other effect. The lightning bolt symbol is a symbol that indicates an action, a special action, and heroes and monsters have special actions that correspond to that symbol. So you need to spend one of those symbols to activate the special action on your card. Lisa has this special action, the Moonbeam Cat has these special actions, and the player that controls the monster against me can choose to use either of these if the player has scored sufficient lightning bolts. Other effects, the shield displayed when the opponent is giving you damage, because then you use it to protect yourself against damage. There is another symbol here that allows you to double the effect of another symbol. So you stack it as an action with another token, and then the next action that you take, if you activate that token, it doubles the value. So the heroes have 2 types of damage they can give to the opponents, melee, magic, or melee. And the opponents have this generic skull that represents a damage that they give to the hero. There's nothing. It may help them with initiative, but it's worth nothing. So we simply alternate back and forth. When I'm done with all of my tokens, or I decide not to use them all and I pass, and you, controlling the monster, also have done all that you could with your tokens. If you're both still alive, we flip the tokens again, and we proceed to another round of combat until one of us is eliminated. When you eliminate a monster, usually you get the monster card as a trophy. So we mentioned trophies earlier. Basically, the adventure cards that I showed you earlier, on one side they have a challenge, and once you complete the challenge, usually you flip them on the other side and you keep them as trophies. So these cards, once they're face down, are used to record trophies, which you use to buy skills or to complete other types of actions. And this, in essence, is the game. You keep repeating the turn sequence. Each player takes their turn with 3 actions. As the game progresses, there are also adventure cards. In several turns, you need to draw a card from an adventure deck. This creates new conditions that open up new possibilities, new challenges, new places where you can go and collect different types of things. And they are related to the scenario that you're playing. There are different types of scenarios that come with different cards specifically. So you continue like this, taking turns, performing actions, resolving adventure cards as they apply, until, well, either one player wins the game by completing the scenario, by meeting the victory conditions of the scenario, or it may also happen that nobody wins, and actually there's a situation arises on the board that forces all players to lose. So, in my introduction, I mentioned 2 games that belong to the same family as Runebound, those being Talisman and Mage Knight, the board game. And I don't particularly I'm not a big fan of either of them. Talisman, I was a big fan of it when I was like 12. Now just there isn't enough meat for me to really keep me excited. And Mage Knight, the board game, to me is just too complicated and convoluted. Mind you, I play very complex games too, but that one somehow seems to have degrees of complexities that are a little bit gratuitous. It feels like it's complex for the sake of it. And so then playing feels very mechanical. I think about the mechanics of the game much more than the story that the game is supposed to tell. And when I play a fantasy campaign game, I really actually want to see the novel. I want to see the progression of the characters. I want to see the plot. I want to see the theme. And to me, in Mage Knight, the board game, that is obscured by the mechanics. Why am I expounding on those 2 games? Because to me, Runebound is actually the perfect medium. It really falls between those 2 games. There's much more meat in Talisman and not too much as you can find in Mage Knight. The complexity to me is just right. I mean, pretty much everything is really just right. There's enough complexity, yes, to have interesting tactical confrontations, interesting challenges, but not to the point that the theme is obfuscated by the mechanics. You do see your character becoming stronger and stronger. You do see new upgrades making sense and just adding more layers to the character that gets fleshed out better and better. Those upgrades do not feel like flavorless, just okay, I got a +1 here, okay, I got this little bonus there. They're tied to stories. They may come from adventure cards that have specific plots. Actually, you see how the character got to acquire the certain upgrade. The fact that the weapons come with tokens that can be used in different ways also just adds a lot of flavor, which is very well ingrained within the mechanics. Again, I never have a moment where the mechanics take control of the game. To me, the mechanics flow well together with the theme, and they still give me a sense of progression that I really, really like. Now, I've heard some people being concerned about downtime. I did not have this problem playing with 2 players or with 3 players or solitaire, because actually the game also plays well solitaire, because as long as you're able to simply perform the duels by yourselves, so you simply toss the runes for the monsters and then those for yourselves, and then you play the monster at the best of your possibilities. Oh, you cheat a little bit, the monster that day is distracted and doesn't fight very well. Actually, you can play the game solitaire and see the story, see the advancement, and get the challenge of being able to strengthen your character enough to be able to face the final confrontation. So with 1 player, no problem, no downtime whatsoever. It's like I was always playing. With 2 players, not a problem at all. 1 player is taking their turn, the other player is thinking about their turn, and if there is a duel, then the other player is the one that is playing the role of the monster. With 3 players, not a problem again, because you have, I am taking my turn and facing a monster. The player before me is the monster, and next player goes ahead and takes their turn. So everybody has something to do. And in the turns where you do not have a monster, actually the game flows pretty well because it is pretty much roll, move around, see the card, maybe flip a card, read it, add it to your pool of cards, and that's it. So I didn't find downtime to be a problem. There were moments in which, yes, I wasn't doing anything because maybe somebody else were doing other stuff, and somehow the game was going through a bit of a lull, but I didn't mind those because they weren't too long and they just gave me enough time to actually think about my strategy. So I really like it. I find the pace to be quite good. The game is pretty long overall. This is gonna be the game for an evening. I don't know how long your evenings are, so actually I shouldn't make assumptions about that. But a game, most likely you won't be. Most people will not be able to get 2 games of this game in a game night. 4 players haven't played it, and actually, that I don't know that I would like it. That is a way of playing the game that actually may concern me a little bit. In that case, maybe downtime may become a problem. But as is, length is a factor, not a problem, because if you are engaged in the game, then actually this long period of playing, which matches a long period of time occurring in the world of the story, and matches a really interesting arc of character development for your character, then really I don't mind that the game takes the time that it takes to tell a story that is from these amateur heroes that are going out, leaving the house, saying hi to mom, and going out on adventures for the first time, and then at the end of this epic adventure, hours later in our world, weeks, months later, years later, in the world of the story, actually they have become powerful, strong heroes able to fight against the final menace. So I really find that that's not to be a problem, that the length of time actually to be adequate to the kind of game that the game is. Is story driven, is very thematic, and I really like that in all the games that I play. The theme is there. I really do get the sense it's a story with a strong, it's a game with a strong story that emerges, or a story with a great game behind. Either way you want to say it, but I really like it. It tells the kind of story that I want to read in books, watching movies, and playing games. As is, I really like Runebound. I like the story, I like the components, the rules are just right, the variety of events is interesting, the combat system I like very much. Again, just right. Enough meat to be interesting. In most cases you will have several rounds of combat, so you have that excitement. Okay, I'm a little bit ahead, but the opponent took a lot of hits, but now he's regenerating, so you have a certain narrative there. But again, it doesn't drag on too long. Good. Everything about this game is really good. If you don't fear a game that takes a while to play, but then also rewards you with a story that has a certain epic span, then I believe that Runebound really is a game that you may enjoy.